Hello, welcome to my Dresden File vlogs. Well, we are on to Grave Peril, book 3 in the Dresden Files. I will be once again doing a full spoiler vlog for this book. If you haven't seen my full spoilers for Book 2, Full Moon, I will link that spoiler vlog for you. Right now I've only read the first 3 chapters and we're going on a ghost hunt. We're vanquishing ghosts with Dresden and his partner in crime currently, Michael, who hasn't really been in the previous books, maybe mentioned by name, but I don't remember. He is a knight, seems to me to be very closely associated with the angelic type of supernatural being. That's my consensus on who Michael is, that he's actually not human at all. Right away, we're starting off pretty interesting to me with the ghost hunt, and now we have just entered a portal to go chase this ghost down and all the things that could go wrong with that. I think I'm gonna sort of approach this spoiler vlog slightly different. I don't know if I'm gonna give as many updates as I did in the previous vlog, but we'll see how I feel. I'm not quite sure if the mystery is going to be the same yet, because we right away had a murder scene for the previous book, and this one it's starting off with a monster chase, so I'm not sure where this one is gonna go. I hope you'll join me for this third book. Hi, it's early. As you can see, the sun barely just came up, but I need to give you an update so I can continue past the cliffhanger that I got to last night. So after I talked to you briefly in the intro, we rewound after that chapter back to earlier in that day before there was any ghost hunting happening, and a young woman once again shows up at Dresden's Wizard Detective Agency, and she won't give her actual name, so she tells us to call her Lydia, since in the magic world all names hold power. She goes to Dresden for help and says she had a premonition of danger for herself, and we learn about Cassandra tears, which are these premonitions of the future or visions of the future that often come about during seizures, and humans that aren't familiar with the magic realm assume these as natural medical things like epilepsy and stuff. I thought that was interesting from outside of the book perspective, but Lydia saw herself being hunted down by 3 spirits, and since Dresden is already dealing with the outbreak in the city of these ghosts, he agrees to help her but tells her to come back by in the morning, and from there that's where then we pick up what we saw previously with Michael and Dresden ghost hunting and ending up in the rift. So Dresden and Michael go into this rift, hunt down Agnes the ghost, and end up ghost busting and get rid of her, but they find on her body that there's this weird wiring on her that leads them to believe someone is controlling these ghosts, But then Dresden's godmother, Leah, shows up with a bunch of hellhounds or heckhounds, because that is one of the things I enjoy so far about the character of Michael, which I learn now is not an angelic being at all. He's a regular person, just a righteous man. He holds one of 3 swords that are designed around the 3 nails of the crucifixion. And so he has one of these 3, and he is a Knight of the Cross. And he is actually a family man with kids, one on the way. His wife's name is Charity. But I thought he was more of like an archangel because of the Archangel Michael, but that's not the case. It was just a choice of names. It wasn't that on point with the name. So I'm really enjoying Michael as a character. Anyways, the Leah and the Heckhounds catch up with Dresden, and they have to maneuver their way out and get out of I think it's the Never Never. I don't remember. It's just an opposite realm to Chicago where they can kill this ghost. But through Leah showing up, we learn about how when Dresden was a young child with his mom made a blood pact with the godmother Leah, and Dresden agreed because he was a child, from what I could gather. So there's this odd pact that happened previously that kind of binds Dresden to his godmother if he's in this realm. And it made me think about in the previous book where Dresden summoned the demon Chauncey, and Chauncey was trying to get him to give him another one of his names, and tried to tell him there was stuff that he didn't know about his mom. And I'm thinking this blood pact thing with the godmother and that are somehow intertwined in the information that Dresden doesn't know. So that's a piece I'm taking for the future in this series. So right now there's 3 things we know. We know that this Lydia person is having premonitions of ghosts coming to hunt her, and Dresden's involved in that premonition to stop it. We know that these ghosts are probably being controlled by someone. I have a suspicion that Marconi is somehow involved once again, and Chauncey the demon knows something that Dresden doesn't about his mom and that whole pact. I don't know if this is going to come into play in this book, but that I'm keeping that as information we know. So then we end up with Michael and Dresden falling back through the portal into real Chicago, and they immediately are taken into custody by the police because they're in this hospital trespassing, and so they end up in a jail cell. Susan and Charity come and bail their men out, and once Susan and Dresden are back at his apartment, things are kind of odd. Mister's not there begging for food, which really concerned me, but since we find out that it's because these vampires have been hanging around waiting for Dresden to get home, I suspect that Mister is just staying away from the apartment. But my final thought is these vampires being here made me call back to the very first book, Stormfront, where I don't remember the vampiress, her name. I can't recall what her specific name was, but because she didn't kill Dresden for revealing her true form, he owes her a favor, and I think that favor is gonna come into play in what I read next. And I specifically wanted to do this check-in so I could tell you my thoughts before we get over the cliffhanger, that I think something in between the vampires and the ghosts is going on, and maybe it's disrupting the vampires too, since the vampires are out at night and out during the times that these ghosts are, their magic is supposed to be stronger. So that's my theory with that. We have this ghost infestation that we still have to go in and be Ghostbusters for, because someone is controlling them. Okay, quick check-in. Mercy's right there, if you care about seeing the cats. The vampires were there to give a handwritten invitation to Harry to the Vampire Council's ball. Susan tries to get Harry to bring her along to this ball. He says no, and so we'll see where that goes once the ball is actually happening, if she ends up there or not. And then Michael comes pounding on the door in the morning, and because Harry had told Lydia to go to the church for asylum overnight until they could talk more about her problem with the ghosts and her visions. Apparently overnight there was something trying to get in the church at her, and the priest there, he reads the Bible out loud to keep this thing at bay, but it angers it. It trashes the cars in the parking lot and still tries to get in the church at Lydia, and Lydia ends up leaving out the back door, so Lydia is now missing, and we have a missing persons case now to solve. Alright, it's time to give you an update after a ton of stuff happened. We got Mercy in the window staring at some geese. So let me catch you up to where I am. I stopped at chapter 22. And before I get to my brainstorm of what I think might happen, let me fill you in on what transpired since my last update. So Dresden went and met with his friend Mortimer, or Morty. He is a former ectomancer, so he can sense spirits when they cross over from the Never Never, and he can just sense them. Right now he is just a fake seance con artist talking to the dead with different people to bring them closure. He tells Dresden something big came through the Never Never, and he's skipping town, getting out of town, and he tells Dresden he probably wants to sit this one out and leave it to someone else. But of course Dresden is not going to do that. But Mortimer leaves his journals of information with Dresden, and one of Mortimer's theories is that the veil between the Never Never and the real world is shrinking, or it's eroding away, so things eventually will be able to cross over even easier, and they don't know if someone specifically is doing that or why that's happening, but that's a side point to consider. But then Dresden gets picked up by some police officers that work with Murphy, and he's told that Murphy needs him for something, and it's because Mickey Malone, which is part of Murphy's police force, basically it seems like he's possessed, but he's not possessed, and Dresden finds out it's the nightmare that came to Mickey Malone, and Dresden manages to rid him of a wire that's very similar to the one that was in Agnes the Ghost. The nightmare is wrapping itself around these people with this wire and causing them to basically have nightmares. But Dresden manages to rip this wire out and throw it out the window and burn it. But after this, Dresden goes home, goes to sleep, and the nightmare attacks him and gives him this nightmare of a previous encounter with a demon that involved Murphy and Michael and him, that they brought down this demon and killed it. But in this nightmare version, everything goes wrong and everyone is hurt, and Bob, as Mister, manages to wake Dresden up before he can fall too deeply in this nightmare. But the nightmare manages to steal some of his magic, leaving Dresden weaker than he was before with his magic, and it depletes a lot faster. It's like in a video game when you have a mana bar and that mana bar has less in it for you to use. I'm getting out of order, but I forgot to mention, before this nightmare attack on Dresden happens, Dresden does find Lydia, but her body is limp, and he runs into the same two vampires that delivered him the invitation to the vampire ball. The female seems to be uncontrollable. Kyle, her twin, has to peel her off of Dresden so that she doesn't drink his blood. But it seems to be an odd situation that they're somehow involved with Lydia. Dresden has to kind of drearily get back home because the saliva of vampires is almost like a drug when it touches your skin. So he's in this state as he goes home, and then once he falls asleep, that's when he's attacked by this nightmare. So it makes it easier for the nightmare to get in his mind while sleeping. Then once Dresden wakes up from this dream, he realizes that because the nightmare stole some of his power, the nightmare can now mimic him. And he figures that out because he calls Murphy saying he's gonna be there in 20 minutes, but she's like, you just talked to me 5 minutes ago. So he learns that this nightmare now, because he took some of his magic power, that the nightmare can mimic Dresden. And so he rushes over to the police headquarters to protect Murphy. He finds the nightmare as like a shadowy version of him. He does manage to save Murphy, but Murphy is left in kind of a blank state where she's still kind of stuck in that nightmare. And since Michael was also involved in this demon killing, Dresden is very concerned with the nightmare going after Michael, because they believe that this nightmare is a demon's ghost. So they think this demon that they killed might be seeking revenge, and Dresden believes Michael is next since Murphy was just attacked. And he gets to Michael's house. Then they both realize this demon is actually going after Charity, Michael's wife. So they rush off to find Charity at the store. Then a bunch of stuff goes on all at once. Dresden goes after Charity alone in a cemetery and finds the nightmare trying to hurt Charity, and out of the blue, Dresden's godmother shows up and makes a deal with him because Dresden gets knocked down and knocked out of the fight. She makes a deal with him to help him in exchange for him actually following the original pact and coming to the Never Never with her. So he is able to get up again. He gets the nightmare away from Charity, and Michael then shows up with his sword. Charity goes into labor, and Dresden manages to push the nightmare into the river and basically melt him, sending him back to the Never Never. But when his godmother shows up to collect her fee for their little deal of her helping him, she already knew that Dresden was gonna back out of that deal. And because Dresden tries to use Michael's sword against her, she's able to take it. So she now has Amaracus, which is a very powerful sword, and I believe it's the only thing that can really vanquish this nightmare. So now they don't have that. And I'm sure she was able to take it because you're not supposed to use the sword in like an unrighteous way. So I'm sure based on how Michael is able to have the sword and use it for like a righteous way, it's kind of similar to a paladin, then that sword, because it was used against her, she was able to take it, is my interpretation of how that works. So now our very powerful sword is in the hands of Leah. Now I will get into my brainstorm of taking a little bit of time, pausing the book, taking a little bit of time to just kind of think through what happened so far, because this book is very different than the first two. We're not given really a straightforward mystery or who done it It's not even a missing person case like I thought maybe the Lydia disappearance would be. Let's get into my brainstorm session. My head under my bed, thinking something out of my nightmares. After thinking about everything, we got our invite to the vampire ball, and we know that the vampires are somehow involved because we found them with Lydia and her body. So I'm thinking we might be forced to attend this ball in order to resolve this, and the vampires either may be involved with the nightmare or involved with Leah, or they also, the vampires might be trying to still stop the nightmare in their own way for their own reasons, and they may team up with Dresden, and this ball might be one way to team up with them to figure out what's going on with the vampires. But that's my first theory, is we have this vampire ball to go to. I think we're gonna go to that, and maybe Susan will get to go with just to be sidekick, because Michael already doesn't have his sword, so without Michael's sword, he's not really gonna be able to help a whole lot. So maybe we're gonna get like a trio type thing where Susan, Michael, and Dresden are all three gonna go to this ball, maybe. And then with Leah stealing the sword, I'm not sure if she's gonna be in league with the vampires or if she has her own reasons for stealing this sword. Because Leah is in the Never Never, she may be working with the nightmare, and also this theory about how the veil is thinning, she may be somewhat behind that. And I'm not sure if she would be working with the vampires or we're gonna team up with the vampires because we're on the other side of the Never Never. So it might be like real world against Never Never, maybe. But that's my thoughts so far, because we don't really have a murder mystery to solve, but I still want to figure out what's going on as if I'm the Detective Harry, even though a lot of the information we're getting is not through hints and clues really, other than just getting some information along the way and a lot of things happening all at once. I didn't think his godmother would be back as soon in this book, if at all. I guess I should start paying more attention, because in Full Moon, the apprentice Kim was later killed by the Loop Garu, and so she came into play earlier than I thought she would, and I didn't think she'd be dead when she appeared again. So I need to start paying attention when Jim Butcher introduces characters, because they're probably gonna appear sooner than I think. But that's my update for now, and we'll see what happens because things are happening at a rapid pace. This book is crazy. I have a lot to update you on before I get to the last few chapters. I only have about an hour and a half left. I stopped at chapter 34 last night. Okay, so first off, I was correct that we were gonna go to this vampire ball. Dresden caught on quickly to need to go there. And the trio that I mentioned happened, but in a different way. So I'm gonna go ahead and sum up everything that happened. It was kind of a big avalanche of everything falling together. So Charity ends up at the hospital and has their son, and the son is in a weakened state and not doing well, and both are in the hospital because Charity had to have a C-section for the pregnancy. This is when Dresden decides to bind the nightmare so that it can only hurt Dresden himself and not anyone else. So he does this summoning to be able to do that. And then after that is when they decide to go to, him and Michael decide to go to the Vampire Council ball. At this ball, they meet Thomas, who is a white court vampire, and he seems to be very helpful to them. And we learn that there are 3 vampire courts, the black, the red, and the white, and they are all present here at this ball. And I found it really funny because Dresden is dressed for this masquerade ball as like a cheesy version of a vampire. Makes all the vampires in the room pretty upset. But I enjoy Jim Butcher's writing of this character because the only other thing I've read by Jim Butcher is his Steampunk Cinder Spires series, and I feel like he can have a lot more fun with the characters in this book than he can in that one. The ball has these rules that none of these vampires can harm the humans that were invited. Susan is disguised, we find out, and she came in with a fake invitation, which means this basically contract doesn't apply to her, so she can be hurt by the vampires or any other creature that is at this ball, which we end up running into Leah again, Dresden's godmother. And because Dresden denies her for a 3rd time, then basically the magic causes him to start being in pain and not able, basically his body is kind of shutting down based on thrice denial of this pact between him and Leah. Susan is offered to trade something in order to take away this price from Dresden, and she gives up 1 year of her memory, which means she no longer remembers Dresden or Michael. I feel like in the moment that then she trades in, Dresden basically recuperates and realizes that she doesn't remember him or anything. He doesn't, I don't think, in that moment realize what that means for their relationship. So I think later on, when he's not worried about life and death, he's gonna realize he actually should have told her that he loved her. That's gonna be more emotional damage to him later. But right now, he's too worried about getting out of this issue with the vampires and finding who's controlling the nightmare that I don't think his brain is even thinking that far yet. And we discover this Black Court vampire named Mavra, which Michael knows from previously killing a bunch of her children and grandchildren, so other vampires, under her, and basically she has something against Michael because he murdered her family. She tries to instigate a fight and a duel with Dresden, but Susan happened to bring a basket with her with a bunch of vampire deterrents, and one of them being garlic, which is specifically the Black Court vampires' weakness. So they're able to repel her back, at least until this meet and greet portion of the ball stops, and then it gets into the gift giving by Bianca. And it's then that Dresden realizes, one, that Mavra was the one controlling the nightmare, that Bianca's plan all along was to trap all her enemies in this one room and take them out all at once. So the vampires were behind the nightmare. My very, very first inclination that Marconi was going to be somehow involved in this is yet to be seen. We'll see if somehow at the end he pops up and is like, and I'm also in cahoots with Bianca. Anyway, to try to speed this up, one of the gifts is the sword, Amaracus, and then there's also Lydia that's unconscious, and they plan to basically desecrate the power of this sword by killing an innocent, so they're going to use it to kill Lydia. So the helpful vampire Thomas, Michael, Harry, and Susan all have to group up and stop this from happening. Thomas really wants to keep his consort Justine, and Bianca uses this and says basically, you can sacrifice these 3 humans and you'll get to keep your consort Justine, and you're free to walk out of here unscathed, basically. But so Thomas kind of backstabs them and kicks Susan into the vampires, and she gets attacked, but Bianca isn't true to her word and also sicks some of the vampires to kill Thomas, and so instantly he has regret over his decision, and a battle ensues to try and get this sword to try and stop as much death to humans as possible. And ultimately, Dresden decides to just light everything on fire. Him, Michael carrying Lydia get out. Then back at Dresden's apartment, Lydia wakes up and is possessed by the nightmare, and this is where Dresden realizes the nightmare isn't actually a demon ghost, it's the ghost of a sorcerer Kravos, which was previously mentioned that Murphy was working on this case. So there was little itty bitty hints, but I don't think it was enough that I would have summed it up to realize it. And before this even happens, Thomas does show up again at Dresden's door with Amaracus. So they now have the sword back, and Thomas is apologetic and is like, we both have something in common, that we have someone to rescue from Bianca, and I basically did some spying for you because I know how to lie and basically be a good spy, and I know the layout and where they're keeping these 2 in their mansion. They're both alive. We just need to go rescue them. So then Dresden gets the idea to basically use the Never Never as a secret passage to basically tunnel to the opposite, be in the opposite realm, and then basically pop back up in the real world in the mansion after traveling through the Never Never. So Thomas, Michael, Harry, and then they bring Bob as a tour guide through the Never Never. They get to the Fey realm of the Never Never and run into Leah again, but Dresden is expecting her. So he devises a plan that he actually ate poisonous mushrooms, and in order for her to be able to have him alive, she has to bargain with Michael for the antidote, and that makes it so that she has to bargain. And then as Dresden escapes, Thomas and Michael guard the bridge he has to cross, and so Dresden goes across into the portal to the real world in the mansion, but when he comes out on the other side, he's directly in line of sight of all the vampires, and Bianca was expecting him. So he's now captured by the vampires once he got to that other side. So that's where I am now. Hopefully I sum that up quickly and efficiently, because a lot of stuff happened. I plan on finishing the rest of the book today, and I'll give one last final thoughts, what I thought of the book. I am actually kind of surprised that I was so correct during my brainstorm. We didn't get things specifically as I maybe thought they would be. Like the trio at the vampire ball was different because Susan came later, but as we knew she wanted to be there, and Dresden happened to miss her phone call, and they could have ended up going as a trio. I thought it was interesting that Michael did still have magic power without the sword, because when the twin vampires that we've been running into come up to him, and the girl vampire, the uncontrollable girl vampire, touches him, he burns her because of basically the righteous holiness in him. He's our paladin, so sure. Still enjoying Michael as a character. I hope we get him in other books. He's starting to be a good sidekick character that I enjoy. I haven't caught on to, like, Murphy hasn't stuck out to me a whole lot yet. I think I've tended to get more frustrated with her than liking her. We'll see if she changes for the rest of the series. I mean, after she's gone through this whole nightmare incident, maybe she'll have like a life-altering trauma from that. So we'll see how this book ends. I just finished Grave Peril, and I guess I didn't fully expect some of what happened in the end to happen. So let me give a super quick summary, because I know this video is already super long. So Dresden is thrown in a cell with Justine and Susan. Susan gets changed into a vampire. Harry sort of does this like soul gaze thing, but backwards. So, and then as soon as he says, "I love you" to Susan, then she gets all her memories that Leah stole from her back. So it strengthens the human side of her more, so she's able to help Dresden. Dresden fully defeats Kravos by dying and using his ghost to defeat him in the Never Never. Then they're all taken to Bianca, and and Bianca makes a final deal to Dresden that if she takes Susan, she won't start a war between the vampires and the White Council. But of course, Dresden isn't going to give Susan up, so then a big battle happens and he gets the ghosts of the humans who had been attacked by the vampires to also fight. So there's a bunch of ghosts fighting as well, and Bianca gets basically attacked by a bunch of the ghost army. I am unsure if she is actually gone. The building does get lit on fire again, but without a body showing up, I'm skeptical as to Bianca being dead. So I don't fully believe that she's gone. And Dresden was still able to escape with Susan and Justine. But now Susan is forever changed into a vampire, and that becomes a new conflict, and Susan kind of ghosts Dresden, and he has to go and using some of her hair that's left on a hairbrush, he goes and finds her on a beach. She basically says everything's different now because she's a vampire and she has to control that thirst that she feels. And Harry actually proposes to her, but she says no because she has forever been changed by the event of being changed into a vampire. So then the end of the book, Harry's trying to work on some sort of cure for her. There's also the White Council is coming to Chicago because now there's still a war that's gonna be happening between the vampires and the White Council. So we have that for that setup for the next book. Final thoughts. I enjoyed this one. I'm gonna give it a 4-star. It's not quite a 5-star because I think there was a lot that happened and it was fun and action-packed, but I think it was almost too much. And maybe that's just because I was vlogging this, but I feel like the average reader would not pick up on many of the things that were thrown at you in this book. We also got a little bit TMI with some of the descriptions of women. I really don't need as in-depth as some of them were given, but it still wasn't anything that was too demeaning or derogatory like I put out in my first book review. I don't have a huge problem with it. It was just kind of stuff I didn't really care to, mostly listen described to me. And the other thing is, the very first book I had the graphic audiobook, and I don't know if these audiobooks increase in quality as the series goes on, since these are written in like the 2000s. So I heard a lot of the like mouth smacking between like breaths that this narrator did, and that sort of bothered me too. That doesn't mean that went towards the star rating or anything. It was just something I noticed. while getting through this book. But overall, I had a fun time with this. I'm having fun doing these vlogs. So be sure to comment if you are enjoying these, if you stumbled upon this and you're now binging this series that I started doing. And I can't wait to pick up Summer Night. So be sure to stick around and see what I think about the rest of the series. And so I can see everyone in my next video, please hit that subscribe button. And YouTube thinks these videos are ones that you would want to watch. So please click on those for more reading content from me.